In a game Irish Illustrated and most Notre Dame observers felt the Irish could not afford to lose, they did not. Beating Louisville today, 31-24 on the strength of a fantastic first quarter and a clutch fourth quarter drive. And JB got a little hairy there in the middle as things slowed down for Notre Dame, but that was a wild first 24 minutes of the contest.
Yeah, 5 turnovers, just unbelievable. And really, when you think about Notre Dame holding Louisville just before halftime on that 4th and short, that's a de facto turnover. Really 4 first-half turnovers for Louisville in this contest. The difference in the game, frankly, I think you give Notre Dame credit for finding a way to win. You also very clearly say, man, this team has a lot of issues, and depending on how the injury news shakes out, especially along the defensive front, you worry about how many more issues this team might have moving forward. But this was a game they had to win. I called it the biggest game of Marcus Freeman's career. I said it was a juncture point in the season. They get through the juncture with a W. They get 2 weeks before they host Stanford. I know Stanford's at Clemson today. I'm not sure Stanford's schedule next week, but you hope that if Stanford's not off, you finally get a team that's beaten up a little bit or a little bit more tired.
Yeah, and it's the game could not have started worse for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, or for Devin Ford, who fumbled the opening kickoff. It took Louisville only 3 plays to score, take a 7-0 lead. And that was a little worrisome because the crowd was into it pregame. They were ready to go. And that's just, I can't remember the last time I saw the opening kickoff fumble like that at Notre Dame Stadium in that situation. Not the first one. But Irish responded with the best drive of the football season for them so far. And I think even discounting Purdue as an opponent, how much better Louisville's defense is, it was still the best drive of the season so far.
Yeah, I can entertain that contention. I would also say what proved to be the game-winning touchdown drive might have been the best drive so far. Also, I believe covered 75 yards, came at a point in time where you felt like if Notre Dame didn't do something there, that it was going to lose the ball game. And we saw some new wrinkles. We heard Riley Leonard say, man, when you get a play like that, you just know it's going to work. You get so excited and you got to not mess it up. He said, because those guys were absolutely wide open. And Jaden Harrison was wide open. That was a 34-yard gain, I think, or 37. And then they hit Jeremiah Love on a backside screen that it's hard to execute better than what Notre Dame did those 2 plays. It's hard to wonder why Notre Dame doesn't execute more consistently.
Then you brought this up on instant analysis. As important as Notre Dame's response was to go down and tie the score at 7 right away with a quality drive to get the crowd back in it, Tyler Shough taking off and running for 43 yards and fooling everybody and running away from the defense for a while until Leonard Moore caught him. Textbook strip, and that's the hustle you want to see. Jaden Osbury hustling downfield with a wonderful fumble recovery, because if he bobbles it at all, he probably ends up being out of bounds as he's recovering it. That was a huge momentum swing.
Oh, it was critical. And once again, it appeared Notre Dame had Louisville in some compromising field position situations over the course of the game, but particularly early, like that possession started at the 8-yard line, and Shough takes off for 46 yards, and on a single play is flipping the field into Notre Dame territory, but it takes the freshman playing like a guy who was in his 4th year and had made a bunch of big plays and big appearances in Notre Dame Stadium. I'll tell you what, we've said it before. I'll say it again right now. I think it's imperative. Mike Mickens might not have an equal evaluating defensive backs anywhere in college football. The guy is superhuman when it comes to evaluating players in the secondary. And we note he's the guy who found Sauce Gardner. Right. He loved Benjamin Morrison when there were other guys highly rated on the board and went all out for him. And he loved Leonard as well. And just phenomenal play.
Well, it's funny you said that, because Jeffrey Zielinski says Leonard Sauce Moore had a great game, and he did. He gave up a touchdown late, but that was another heck of a catch, and he was right there on the coverage on that one as well. Then, of course, I thought for my notebook, I chose special teams player of the game. Rendell had a good game punting. Jeter hit a clutch field goal. Jordan Faison coming through the punter on that bad snap. It's a bad snap. It goes over his head. Faison just shoots himself into the punter's body. That ball caroms 20 yards because of it. Notre Dame recovers the ball. Kennedy Urlacher got a huge cheer from the crowd. That crowd already loves Kennedy Urlacher, it seems. 4-yard line, Riley Leonard goes in. That's when you felt, all right, they have taken control of this game at this point as well.
No, you felt like all day long that there was going to be a moment where finally Notre Dame seized control. I thought it was really close to being that after the turnover, in which they ended up having to settle for the field goal when they were in plus territory and only moved the ball 6 yards, and then got a 48-yard field goal from Mitch Jeter. So we've talked before, you win a game like this, You lost statistically in so many categories, but you made the most of turnovers, and you scored more points off turnovers than they did. But a lot of teach tape, and it's needed. There's just so much room for improvement. You saw Louisville adjust and really take away Notre Dame's run over the course of the game. We don't know how much of that changed when Notre Dame temporarily changed its offensive identity after Riley Leonard was again shaken up. But we're not used to seeing teams gash Notre Dame's run on the ground with the way we saw today. But obviously, we've talked about them missing 3 starters on the offensive line. And late in this game, they had Sullivan Absher in at guard because Sam Pendleton was dinged up, I believe. So there's another injury to pay attention to. But that defensive line, you've not had Gabe Rubio all year. You now don't have Botello. I saw Boubacar Traore had a massive, massive wrap on his left leg, and he got so many hugs. And
that's the telltale. The hugs is
trainers,
the telltale.
The hugs and the handshakes and trainers leaning around and whispering into his ear. There was nothing about that appeared encouraging for Notre Dame.
That's a shame. He had one of the nicest chase down tackles for losses of the season. Prior to that, he's really become a fun player to watch. You mentioned the kind of how the offense kind of turned into a slog there. It happens almost every game. It's happened every game except for the Purdue game. We talk about it on our Thursday pregame, Irish Illustrated Insider podcast. There's always going to be a slog today. Unfortunately, you had 22 minutes without a third down conversion and 38 minutes between touchdowns. Now, that's why Mitch Jeter's field goal is so important. That's something they're going to have to work their way out of. And we've had a couple questions on here say the exact same thing you and I said. Whether they meant to or not, the offensive approach did change when Riley Leonard got hurt. From that point forward, he didn't run, as you said, he didn't run the rest of the first half. They did have to run him in the second half. If it's only because they got out of rhythm and couldn't find their way out of it, that's worse. I hope they were protecting Riley Leonard a little bit in that situation. But to everyone's point, we've talked about this a lot, JB, you and I, they were getting their asses kicked up front. They were getting beaten up front too. That happened in the second half as well.
Yeah, Shammy brings up a good point because we all said it was shades of Northern Illinois after Riley Leonard got hurt. Mike Denbrock saved probably his 2 best play calls of this tenure at Notre Dame for that what proved to be the game-winning touchdown drive. Just beautiful execution, beautiful play call. But yeah, they went into a shell. Louisville was absolutely owning the front 7, that space around the box, and I don't know that it was that Notre Dame's receivers weren't able to beat man coverage at that point in time. They didn't have time. They didn't have time to try and beat the coverage. Riley Leonard looked like he was having 1.5, 2 seconds to get rid of the ball after they got out of rhythm, after he got dinged up, after Notre Dame reverted to its the identity that nobody wants to see Notre Dame have on offense. Yeah. So, again, they have so much to clean up, but you do have to give credit. You find a way to win this game against a Louisville team that even though ranked a spot higher, absolutely had all the freedom in the world to play its loosest game. Yes. And Notre Dame can't be naive. Marcus Freeman has in recent weeks said, we try to block it out, but yeah, of course we hear stuff. Well, they had to hear this was, as you called it, a must not lose game. I stopped just short of calling it a must win game, but it was the nexus point of the season for now.
Yeah, and it's some positives with the defense. First, we'll talk about the first half. 9.86 yards per first down snap for Louisville in the first half. That is absolutely insane. That's like Notre Dame in the old days versus Temple or something along those lines. That shouldn't happen to Notre Dame. They gave up 9 gains of over 10 yards. But the second half, this is a great stat. Because you have to include penalties on first down. When you have a penalty, it's a bad thing. You go backwards, you lose the yards. Louisville's 7 snaps in the third quarter gained negative 12 yards. That was the change from 9 plays per first half per first down to negative 12 and a quarter on first down. Drake Bowen had his best game. They started dialing in on first down, getting run stuffs. I ran out of room trying to get my run stuffs going up and down this page here on 2 sides. And this, a lot of it from the second half. They really turned it around. It's a shame that 1 touchdown pass. As I said, Leonard Moore, good coverage. Louisville's receivers are legit. Who said it over here on the right? You're absolutely right. Louisville's receivers are legit. They came to fight Notre Dame today, but great effort in the second half by the Irish D. Yeah,
and we touched on the injuries along the defensive front to Notre Dame, but no Christian Gray all day today. It's an AC sprain, I think. Jack Kaiser, incredibly limited. I saw him in late on the special teams play, but he did not play the majority of the
second half. Hurt. He came in hurt and tried to play through it.
Yeah, exactly. It looked like an high ankle for him. But again, he was on there very late in the game. but a non-factor for most of the second half. One thing I did note when you touch on the defense, I think 3 sacks today, 7 or 8 tackles for losses,
Yes.
8 or 9 quarterback hurries, much more effective than they've been hurrying the quarterback. And then 5 of Notre Dame's 6 leading tacklers were in their first or second year in the program. Now, you got a couple of veterans there in Jordan Clark and Rod Hurd, but I think you've touched on before, T.O., how overall Notre Dame has been very, very effective with its select portal additions. And when you have first-year players like Leonard Moore leading the team in tackles, and then you have Clark and Hurd up there in the mix as well, along with the Drake Bowen. Ben Morrison was the only veteran, and he's still just a true junior, but he was the only veteran in the top 6 tacklers, I believe. So that's some positive, but Notre Dame has to heal up. It's not a year ago when Notre Dame played 7 consecutive weeks and had flown to Ireland and flown twice to North Carolina and played a couple of games in the Research Triangle, and then also bust down or flew down to Louisville and had that miserable experience. But Notre Dame needs the time off. I think I noted that there were maybe 10 teams in the top 25 this week, T.O., who had only played 3 games. And that bye week matters. It's hard to know exactly when to have that bye week, but this one is an ideal occurrence for Notre Dame because the Irish found a way to win.
Yeah, we have a running joke that they always say the bye week came at a good time. It absolutely 100% came at a good time this season. It's absolutely perfect timing. ND Dan just joined us. Any updates on Boubacar? Yeah, we don't have an official update on him, but it did not look good. To put a bow on your point about the pressure up front, I have 21 tackles by the Irish of less than 3 yards gained by Louisville. That's a fantastic effort up front. And I have 13 combined sacks and pressures on 13 different plays by Notre Dame getting in there. That's huge because Tyler Shook was sacked once coming into this game. It was crucial you had to protect a little bit more without Christian Gray out there. Leonard Moore did a great job. You lose Benjamin Morrison. I mean, that got worrisome. That would have been unsustainable if you're not going to have Benjamin Morrison going forward. So really great second half by the defense. I want to pick up another thing from ND Dan. How do they look so good and then look so bad in a matter of 10 minutes? We're trying to figure that out. I am going to hang on to Riley Leonard, was limited again with some injuries. I don't know how that changes that much, excepting if we ask Mike Denbrock and Marcus Freeman this, whether officially or in confidence, they're going to say we were getting beaten up front, right? We had not much to do to offset it, but there still wasn't much. You saw how Jeff Brom got his team to the corner when necessary, take advantage of RJ Oben on the edge. There are things there that had to happen. As you mentioned, the last drive, beautiful. In between, Louisville might have won on the headsets again for 30 minutes in between. That is what it looked like for those 30 minutes.
There's no question. And, you make a good point about what Louisville was able to do and the way they were able to change. And I do think it is as simple as when Riley Leonard gets dinged up, when he gets knocked out, when he's out for a play and he's coming back and the coaches maybe don't know that he's obviously cleared, and so they feel comfortable letting him back in there. But how clear is he early on? So I understand that there's a little bit of feeling it out when he goes back in. I also think, again, we're not making excuses, but it's an incredibly young offensive line that is an incredibly rebuilt young offensive line from the young offensive line it was supposed to have. I just think you can have one guy misstep on that offensive line. You can have 2 guys that are not on the same page, maybe even on different sides of the line of the offensive line, and that's enough. The margin for error, particularly with Notre Dame's offensive line right now, is so small. They can't get Billy Schrauth back quickly enough. Like Coogan's doing a nice job overall, and they need Ashton Craig back. Obviously, he's not coming back, but they can't get Billy Schrauth back quickly enough this year. But to your point, I thought Louisville won on the headsets for a long stretch, but I think that you saw Notre Dame won on the headsets late when it absolutely mattered. Mike Denbrock especially did. And another thing I would note when we talk about how they've by and large been able to start relatively well, not last week against Miami, but let's not forget those are often scripted plays. You're coming into a game with your top 15 or 20 plays that you want to operate with first on offense. And Notre Dame got, some massive breaks today that let it carry those 15 or 20 plays into a third possession when they were scoring their 21st points of the game.
And this is important, and Marcus Freeman made note of it. It was something going around the press box as well. Louisville had not given up an opening drive touchdown since 2022, a span of 21 games. They show up ready to stop the opposing offense's script that everyone is so comfortable with. And there was some concern in the press box for Notre Dame people that know that they had to win this game. Notre Dame usually starts fast and then hits a slog. So if you're not going to start fast and hit a slog, you're going to be a little bit of trouble against the Cardinals. But yeah, but I meant they won the 30 minutes on the headset. I do think Notre Dame won the bookended that by winning the headsets early and late. One thing I think both disagreed with, and I know Tim Priester did as well, the way they were calling the game when you had 4th and a long 2.5, long 2 3/4 with a 10-point lead in the 4th quarter. For me, that's a punt, no matter what your plan is coming in. And I get the plan. The plan is Riley Leonard's going to pick up more 4th downs and short than he will not. That is an adjustment I think you have to make to the plan. And it sounded like Marcus Freeman said, in hindsight, would I do it again? He said we had a plan. In hindsight, maybe you don't do it again. So when you're up 10 against a team that's not moving the ball on you, that's when I boot it down the field.
Well, and not moving the ball overly well on you, but incredibly explosive, and you don't want to shorten the field for them. And I get you're around the 45 and you think, okay, well, if we punt, we're only gaining 25 extra net yards there. Well, there's still a hell of a lot of difference between 80 yards and 55 yards. Like 25
they kicked
yards,
a 56-yard field goal. They barely gained any yards at all. That was the thing.
25 yards on that. Now, look, I'm well chronicled. I love Riverboat Freeman. I like the fact that he'll go for it. And I do think it sends a message of belief in his team. And he probably wasn't thinking about it, but the team needed a subtext of belief from their head coach today in various moments. But, yeah, that's one that I very, very strongly disagreed with. And on special feature next week coming for where I spent today's game. And the company I was with was a lot smarter football people than me, and there were some disagreements there as well.
One of them was really smarter than you, JP, when we released who you were sitting with today, because he's smarter than all of us and everybody listening, too, when it comes to Notre Dame football. So that's we're not ripping on anybody here. I actually want to point out, good point by Cody Snyder. I had not thought about this because we don't watch every head coaching decision in a victory like we do in defeat. He said Brom thought he had a headset advantage last year. Freeman had it today, and we said he bookended that advantage. Brom using two second-half timeouts on 4th down plays and getting a delay on another is coaching malpractice, which apparently Dylan McCullough has coined the phrase of the season, coaching malpractice, from his pregame with Texas A&M, because everybody's talking about it now. Yeah, that is definitely something where if Marcus Freeman or Brian Kelly or Charlie Weiss did that, we would be going more crazy than Jeff Brom doing it, who we have respect for, but we watch from afar a little bit.
Yeah, I do think that with the 2-minute timeout, since we're massively instructed not to call it the 2-minute warning.
Well, I didn't even know that until I showed up.
I do think it's changing strategy a little bit, and I do think Brom took the timeouts a little bit earlier to absolutely preserve as much clock with more clock on it than saving some for late. So I get both sides of it, but I think the advent of the 2-minute timeout affords coaches some opportunity in that situation to be a bit more aggressive down 2 scores and stop the clock sooner rather than later. You run a better chance of trying to coerce Notre Dame into a 3rd down pass attempt when it's 3rd and 6 and you're rolling Riley Leonard outright.
I had to bring this up because this, I don't think, has anything to do with strength and conditioning. Jim Begley says, with all the injuries, do we need to question our new strength and conditioning program? Well, Louisville would have to fire their strength and conditioning coordinator on the way home right now for all the injuries they suffered today. You got to watch both sides of the game. Louisville was dropping like flies out there today. We only care about when Notre Dame guys get hurt. That was carnage today out there today. It was chippy. It was good hitting, but it wasn't that type of hitting. You get bad luck in football. I mean, Boubacar Traore's knee has nothing to do with strength and conditioning. It has to do with playing on this type of turf. And human body's not supposed to go that way when they're moving that fast at 250 pounds anymore.
And Ashton Craig was lost for the year because he was out in space and got rolled up on and got his knee blown out. That doesn't I get it. I know that there's some hypersensitivity out there for Lauren Lando because he had some soft tissue injury problems with the Broncos. Depends on who you talk to as to what various explanations are for that. But we're not seeing a bunch of hamstrings. We're seeing some really unfortunate ligament and joint injuries, and I don't think that that's a Lauren Lando thing. I mean, Christian Gray didn't play today because he made a hell of a play on an interception last week and somersaulted onto his shoulder. And we just noted why Ashton Craig is out for the year. Boubacar Traore was playing great today and then took that blow to
Jordan Botelho, same as Traore, it looks like. I mean, Jordan Botelho's foot caught as well. Yep.
Exactly. So, and those guys, you see less of those from offensive linemen for the most part because they wear the heavier braces. They have more protection on their legs. These edge guys believe they can't wear those and keep their speed and be as effective. And that's another reason I think that we've seen a couple of really unfortunate injuries at the edge position for Notre Dame. And then Gabriel Rubio broke a bone in his foot.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't have enough milk. I don't know. That's not a strength and conditioning coach issue.
We got a Riley Leonard has been brought up plenty, but Jeremiah Love not. Jeremiah Love again got his. He didn't have a breakaway play. He didn't have a play over 9 yards until that beautiful throwback screen. I want to point out Sam Pendleton did throw the key block on that, and I'm wondering if he got rolled up going out of bounds because I stopped watching Pendleton after he made that block. Yeah. Beautiful play call and great execution. And then Jeremiah Love, when he decided to cut it up the field, just a human bullet getting bounced around in there going in for the touchdown. He and Riley Leonard had, 86 of the 120 sack adjusted rushing yards today. Jadarian Price looked like he fell out of favor after the fumble, JP.
He did. He was hardly seen from again. We saw much more Aeneas Williams. We didn't see Jadarian Price really on special teams after that as well. I do think interesting to note when we talk about what Louisville was able to do to Notre Dame in the run game, this was the first game that Notre Dame's 3 longest runs were 2 12-yard runs and 1 16-yard run.
Yeah.
And they, even when they've been inconsistent in previous games, they've absolutely hit gash plays. And you can instantly think about Jadarian Price busting loose for 47 yards at Texas A&M. You can think about Jeremiah Love having a huge gainer to help set up the game-winning touchdown at Texas A&M. What they did at Purdue were some huge chunk plays. They had a couple of big running plays last week. So it's not only that that Louisville did a lot to bottle up Notre Dame on a down-in, down-out basis in its running game, but Louisville had enough speed and discipline that it didn't give up a gash play that Notre Dame has honestly relied on quite a bit with its ground game.
We're joined by Tim Priester now, and Tim, we have gone back and forth over the offense's slog in the middle. But you had some theories as well. I think you're kind of siding with me that you assume Riley Leonard was injured was limited in some way. Otherwise, the game plan wouldn't have changed in such a stark way. And if not, then I think it's a concern that the game plan changed in such a stark way, regardless of getting beaten up.
I mean, if he wasn't compromised in some way, then Mike Denbrock's play calling was really, really conservative with them and with him in the second half. So, look, I feel like going into this day, Notre Dame just need a win.
Yeah.
They just need to come away with a win. But you start to get a little bit picky, of course, because we're talking about a team that the reason that they had to win today was because they need to stay in the playoff hunt. So I mean, just an observation. They were at a certain point we turned to each other and I said, I mean, they're really playing not to lose offensively, and I get that because your defense is now suddenly playing really well. You've had a double-digit lead. I think I ended up counting it up 28 minutes and change. And so I understand that. But, I mean, Riley Leonard said after the game he needs to heal his body, get his body healed up during the bye week. So, I mean, I don't want to overemphasize it, but they had to have a win today. And that was ultimately the reason I picked them to win was because they had to have a victory today. And we know that this there's good leadership on this team, and it matters to them. And so we thought that they would, do what they had to do in order to be successful and come away with the win. I need to put my headphones in.
I wanted to make one quick follow-up on Stanford. We were talking about Notre Dame's next opponent in 2 weeks at Clemson right now. I think they're down 17-7, but also important to note, T.O., they host Virginia Tech next week, and it's a wounded Virginia Tech team that probably feels like it absolutely should have beaten Miami Friday night down in Coral Gables. But this is still a Virginia Tech team that plays very physical, that returned, I think, 20 of 22 starters coming into this season in ACC play. So Notre Dame's got a chance to heal up, and Stanford has to fly back home cross country after playing this night game at Clemson, and then host Virginia Tech next weekend, then fly back cross country again to Notre Dame. I think those are things that portend well for the Irish.
We want to talk about changing offense. I started last week making a check mark for every efficient run and pass play for both teams. Notre Dame, 12 of their first 17 plays en route to 3 touchdowns were efficient plays. In other words, you stayed ahead of the chains. It was 40%, 50% first down. 12 out of 17, so that's 12-5. The rest of the game, 11 out of 35 plays were efficient plays the entire game. And of course, we know 2 of them was the touchdown run or the touchdown pass to Jeremiah Love and the beautiful play call where the rub route that Riley Leonard described. I'd love to pull that transcript up that Riley Leonard described how they got Jaden Harrison open on that one, because for all the stuff we're saying about the play calling, that was really, really well timed, TP. That was a big one.
Yeah, it was, and we thought Jeff Brom called a really good game. But it got conservative for Notre Dame. But that was absolutely a great call. We said during the pregame incident analysis that this was going to be a real test for both offensive lines, and Notre Dame's offensive line did well early, and then Louisville ended up catching up to them.
Yeah.
And then really similar on the other end of it, 102 yards rushing in the first half by Louisville, and 29 yards on 14 carries in the second half. So in both instances, the defensive lines caught up to the offensive lines.
Yeah, Priest, I mentioned before you joined, they actually have 21 tackles by Notre Dame. On 21 different plays, they limited Louisville to less than 3 or less yards on a tackle. So in other words, doesn't include incomplete passes. That's pretty good effort. And the 3/4 of it was in the second half when they started to assert themselves. I asked Drake Bowen about it, and he said, what we hear a lot, actually. They threw a lot of stuff at us. There's a lot of eye candy, a lot of weird stuff, and that's what they're going to do to Notre Dame's linebackers because they're younger and it takes a while to figure some things out. There's a comment on this board that says Army and Navy might have a couple things pre-snap shift for the linebackers to look at too. I agree. Don't worry about that yet. It's a bye week situation. You still got to take care of Stanford, TP, and JB when they get back.
JB,
it's got to get a little uglier if we start worrying about that down the line.
No, you're right. It will be hard to quantify the value of today's game for Jaden Osbury, Drake Bowen, and more. What they had, and look,
I think KVA too. He got beat on the team, but I thought he played wonderful. Yeah,
I was going to say KVA, and look, let's be really honest about Brice Young and Logan Thomas as well. These guys are going to be so much better the back half of this season because of today. And today was painful, and it was white-knuckled for Notre Dame fans. And you thought, I really believe that if Notre Dame didn't get the score that proved to be the game winner, that Louisville was going to find a way to win this game. And I even believed if they scored to make it 31-30, I think Brom would have probably gone for 2. I didn't get to go to his post-game press conference. I'm not sure if anyone asked him that, but that's the guy he is. That's the coach he is.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but if I were him, I wouldn't go for 2 because he'd have a lot better chance of scoring touchdowns in overtime than Riley Leonard's led offense, the way that offense was going at that point. I think had it been early in the game, the way Leonard was cooking, absolutely you go for the win on the road. But boy, I would have been worried about going to overtime with that team because Notre Dame did not belong in overtime in this game. That's how I feel. Notre Dame did not belong in overtime, and that would have been a great boon for Louisville to go to overtime.
Yeah,
about the Notre Dame Stadium fans not making enough noise. If that game goes into overtime, I mean, that is a demoralized crowd. You could already feel it once we got down on the field when it was a 1-score game. But hey, let's give credit. These aren't younger. Well, Tim, remember at one point I turned to you, I said, that is a young defense out there.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it was true freshmen and redshirt freshmen. And it was not a good situation. But let's give credit to a veteran guy, Rod Hurd II, stepped up playing some corner. Jordan Clark playing some corner. Tim, you said at the end of the game, that last pass play, a little bit concerned about the potential of an interference. But
I'm okay with no calls at the end of games these days.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I get it. But he was a little grabby there at the end, right? So
yes,
but. Look, credit to Notre Dame's defense coming up big, and some guys really had to step in there and bridge the gap with the number of injuries. I know a lot of people are talking about Lauren Lando, and I guess when there are injuries, that's the first person you look at.
We covered it. Don't worry.
I'm sure.
We went over the whole list of injuries. Yeah.
Right. And so Louisville fans are probably saying the same thing about their strength and conditioning coach because they had a bunch of people going down. And JB, you mentioned in pregame instant analysis how many injuries they had. So, I don't know how to affix injuries to a strength and conditioning coach. Although Marcus Freeman in the preseason, when he came out of camp, he said, how happy he was with what Lauren Lando had done and that the injuries were kept to a minimum. But I think let's just be real here, okay? It's very difficult to just sit back. And when you say that some guy get hurt, then you blame the strength and conditioning coach. Like, how do you just affix that to a coach? Is it that, or is it just the common physicality that occurs in a football game? I don't know. I'm just saying that I don't jump to that conclusion immediately, because if we did that all the time, the Louisville fans probably want to fire their strength and conditioning coach.
Two questions left before we go ahead, JB.
I was just going to say real quickly on the Rod Hurd, Jordan Clark duo today and how well they played, not only having to shift into some positions they weren't overly comfortable with, and Marcus Freeman acknowledging post-game that Christian Gray tried to go all week, so they hadn't repped it as much because they thought he was going to be able to play today. They combined for 9 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and I think they combined to break up 3 plays, 3 passes. So that's just sensational. And TP, you weren't on here yet, but we touched on it earlier. You want to see some more out of Riley Leonard, but Notre Dame again continues to prove very effective with the guys it goes and gets out of the transfer portal, and Notre Dame's much more selective in that transfer portal than a team like Louisville or Texas A&M or some of these other programs that are bringing 20 guys in out of the portal.
I want to give Paul Kinlan credit because he said something that Tim Brice would like to say. Wouldn't you agree Louisville is a very talented team? The QB was awesome. The receivers are sensational, yet Notre Dame won the game. You have to give credit to Louisville, too. I mean, those plays were phenomenal plays by their wide receivers.
No doubt. And I thought, early, especially, as the game moved on, Jeff Brom, he's a sensational play caller, too. And so he was creating opportunities for them, and Notre Dame was kind of going into a shell. I mean, that's just an obvious observation, is it not? But I understand, and that's why I asked Marcus Freeman afterwards. They're like, are you staying with a guy and not running the offense that you're capable of running because you're up by 2 scores and you have a great defense? I thought the 4th and 3 near midfield. And we said an instant analysis. I mean, you have a great defense. You'll have even a greater defense if you make Louisville go 85 yards for a touchdown as opposed to 53 or whatever it was.
Final question from Jason Z, and it's going to take us into the bye week. Toughest October game. You got 3 to choose from.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I think it is, T.O. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tim.
Navy. No, Navy is going to be the hardest game for Notre Dame when they play in October.
I thought it was going to be
because of the game situation. The Navy game is going to be the hardest game to win.
What happened to the Stanford game?
That's the second hardest game to win.
And then you have to play.
I've been talking about Navy for a week now on our podcast and everything.
No,
Navy's coming. Did you see what they did today?
I know.
You think that running game's not going to have any success against the linebackers?
There's no doubt. And look, Georgia Tech. When Georgia Tech plays well,
yeah,
they're very very good.
My theory is Notre Dame will be ready for Georgia Tech more so than everything else.
Yeah, probably. And Tim, the bye week came at the right time, did it not?
Yeah, we joked. Yes. Yeah. It never does, except this time it absolutely did. There's no doubt about it. It didn't last year. Everybody's like, the bye week came at a good time. No, it didn't. You already lost a couple times.
Right.
So, they were just tired.
JB's
coming. Bye week good for you, JB, coming up right now, I believe.
You better believe that. I can't wait hopping on an airplane Tuesday. But anyway, I lean Navy, but I also think there's maybe an argument for Georgia Tech because they can do some things to give Notre Dame problems, and it's coming after the bye week and hosting Stanford and then having to get back out on the road again. Now, one thing, I was double checking schedules. Georgia Tech has 2 really tough games right before Notre Dame. I think home against Duke and at North Carolina. And obviously, if North Carolina plays defense like it did last week against James Madison, then Georgia Tech's going to host Notre Dame feeling like it could score on the 85 Bears because North Carolina's defense is so trash. So I see the arguments. The fact that Notre Dame has a bye week, I think I do put Stanford third, even though, again, I love Alec Manor, and the Stanford team is doing a great job, and Troy is doing a really good job rebuilding Stanford a little bit quicker than what I anticipated, just because they're another well-coached team. If you get a chance to watch Stanford, watch them. They're fun to watch.
Look, every game's except Purdue. They played 5 games. 4 of them been hard.
Yeah, I think they made it hard on themselves against Miami, but that's true. That was tight for too long.
No doubt, and made it a little hard on themselves again today, when you take your foot off the pedal a little bit offensively like they did.
But the Irish won 31-24. All three of us said this is either the game of the year, the must not lose game, the please don't lose because it's going to ruin our jobs for 2 months type of game. And that's all. It all proves accurate. Notre Dame 31, Louisville 24, and they will be next time we talk in 2 weeks, probably on the cusp of that top 12, getting ready to host current rival Stanford. Thanks for joining.